but the U-turn is causing, or the potential U-turn. Reeves to climb down on the pub tax is the Daily Telegraph's front page. And this is all to do with the cut or the reduction that was made during COVID, a 75% reduction. This was going to go down to just a 40% reduction and a complete removal in April. And pubs have been saying, this is it for us. If you do this, we can't cope. Do you think they will make a U-turn, first of all?
Yes.
Caroline, there you go. Why? Because pubs have shouted loudly?
I think, well, there has been a very effective campaign by the pubs and their associations that represent them. That whole thing over Christmas of barring Labour MPs from pubs. I don't know how many pubs actually did that, but as a headline, it was impactful. I think there's a number of factors that have been going on here. You mentioned about, obviously, in COVID, not just pubs, but a lot of other businesses were supported in terms of their rates. They were reduced. Now, at some point, that was a temporary measure. There's have to be some normalisation of what the rate should be. But the other issue here, and maybe this is something where, you know, Treasury officials and others needed to have more attention to, is that the rateable value of pubs has gone up enormously
and just
since
explain
COVID.
that. That means the value of the property
yes,
itself.
Exactly,
so
exactly.
The government looks at it, and, or somebody looks at it, a civil servant looks at it and goes, if this were up for rent, what would it achieve if it wasn't a pub? What would it achieve on the basis of the value of the property?
And it's not necessarily linked to their turnover or their profits.
No, just the property itself.
Exactly, it's an asset sort of valuation. And I think there's been a sort of, if you like, misstep between reducing those COVID support that was available, which has to happen over time, and the government did put in an interim measure to actually slow that down. But this other aspect of it, and then, of course, you've got the national income tax and everything else, it's become a storm, hasn't it? So there has been an effective campaign. The problem for the government is obviously, on one hand, it's a positive that they're listening, and I don't think it's too late. A lot of these measures were going to come in April, so if they're going to make a decision, they need to make it fast now to allay people's concerns. But the other problem is if they're going to back off this, is where they're going to fill the gap with the money that won't be coming through that they thought would be coming through.
I mean, there's been a lot of pressure, hasn't there, on Labour MPs. We've seen, you know, somewhat infamously, Labour MPs bad for months. Martin Knowles, you'll remember, was the one in the Chancellor's there, Rachel Reeves, that when they were elected, they were pictured together. We probably have the picture, hopefully, and it was all wonderful celebration. And then he said, no, you're not coming in because of this change in rates. And we contacted him yesterday to say, oh, if it's moved, will that be better? And he said, well, we'll see. So he's, it's not actually opening doors quickly again like they were there all happy in July 24 immediately. And this sort of thing makes other businesses in the high street that are also struggling with rates think, well, hang on a minute, why are pubs so special?
There's always been an argument around pubs in communities and what they add in terms of value beyond what they have as a business. So I think that idea of people being able to socialise, what that does with certain shop fronts, the age of certain pubs as well. Not all pubs fit into that mould. Not all pubs are fantastic. There has to be that idea that actually business is still business at the end of the day.
So a lot of pubs are owned by huge investment firms,
That's exactly the point.
And I'm sure I remember there was one where David Cameron used to go near Chequers, which was owned by a Chinese investment firm or something like that. These companies, not all of them are your local landlord trying to get 12 pence out of a pint to make a profit. Some of them are making millions and millions, and they have hundreds of pubs under their name. So should there be some difference in this change of the business rate? Fine, a U-turn for some who are struggling, but what about the big businesses?
So, look, I don't want to get too technical about
this.
Oh, go
on, Salma, we love your technicalities.
It's quite hard to differentiate and distinguish in our tax system what, you know, a pub that's owned independently versus a pub that's part of a chain. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do think there is an important distinction between the value of the local community pub versus, as you say, international businesses. Because that's not to say we shouldn't look again.
But does that mean then that if it's owned by a chain, the person running it is sort of a franchise owner? Could the cost not go to the chain rather than the individual in that case?
Well, it would in that case.
And then that would help. And if somebody genuinely owns it just themselves, then they could be looked at.
I think the other thing is of course, is that lots of pubs where people don't own it outright, it's the brewery or the people who supply you who control it. So my grandparents were publicans, and
Oh.
I actually,
Explains a
my
lot,
parents ran
Caroline.
a pub for a while, but we were tied into the brewery. We didn't own the pubs ourselves. And my mum always used to say, actually, where we make the money is on the food, because when she made the food, that was under her control.
Yes,
And that's where
exactly.
she made the
But
sort
of course,
the money.
food prices have increased.
Exactly,
for pubs.
so that's
Inflation has kicked
increased
in.
as well.
Let's listen to what Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, had to say in response to this. Well, we all expect now a U-turn on business rates. Let's listen to what she had to say.
What's happened is that over Christmas, Labour MPs were banned from every single pub they tried to get into. They come back and realise that nobody likes them, so now they're pushing for a U-turn. We told them this when Rachel Reeves put out that budget. I told her on that day that she was not doing right by pubs. We have a much better plan, and that is to slash business rates for all of the high street, not just pubs, because what they're doing, if they do it, won't be enough.
Right, 2 points there. Is it, as she says, right, that the whole of the high street should be now shouting as loudly as the pub industry did? Should hair salons and cafes and other people now be saying, actually, hang on a minute, it worked for them, it worked for the farmers, maybe protest is the only way, and I'm sure the doctors are listening. If there's money for pub landlords, the doctors are going on strike and they don't look like they're slowing down. Is that where this government listens? It's when you shout the loudest.
It does feel like they have an inability to resist criticism.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the problems that you have, I mean, not a problem, a reality of politics is that you do things that people aren't going to like. And where there is genuine criticism, where there is a genuine fault, you should own up to that and do it quickly. But what are we talking about? 12 U-turns? This is just looking incompetent now. It's just incompetent. And they're all around tax or cost and spend.
And welfare.
And it's all Treasury.
So the Mail has done a helpful list of U-turns, Caroline. Whether or not you agree they're all U-turns, by the way, because some have just been floated and then not carried through. But the family farm tax was announced in October 24, junked in 25, Employment's Right Bill the same, 24, watered down in 25. Two-child benefit cap, increasing income tax was hinted at. The welfare reforms, of course, she said, no more tax rises, I won't come back for more. I mean, it just goes on. The Green Pledge, grooming gangs inquiry, pressure in January 25, then conceded in June 25. What I suppose it gives, and then winter fuel payments, the first one that really upset people at the very beginning. So I suppose what it comes down to people thinking is, oh, if you're going to do something difficult, do it with conviction and let us understand why, get the messaging right. But don't just do it and then when someone screams change, because that is a damage of trust and confidence, isn't it?
Look, I think it'd be a sad day for democracy if politicians and governments weren't prepared to listen and change their minds. So
Quite.
on that lesson, I think governments that listen, because we can have the best intentions in the world. I think there's an issue around coherence here. On all the different areas that you've cited, Kate, what you would hope is, particularly when they have announced a change, that they've done the legwork, they've done the homework. Yeah. Not only that, to be honest, the civil servants have done the homework, but also you're not just looking at a policy in isolation. So if you look at some of the issues around the pubs, for example, or for that matter, the two-child benefit cap, there's a lot of other issues that have gone on to lead to that decision. Decisions about trying to deal with the fact that we've got too many people in this country of working age who are not working. They're on sickness benefits. So when you make these decisions, you've got to think about the cumulative effect of all these things. So for the pubs, there was a national insurance. Then there was this issue about the clawback from the support that was given during COVID. Then there was the valuation situation. There's a sense that they're not looking at all these things in a holistic way. And as a result, you end up with a policy that when it goes live and becomes something that we all talk about, suddenly all these other factors come in and kick it out of touch. And that's an issue. Coherence is really important.
That is incompetence, though, isn't it? Because here's a criticism right from the beginning of this Labour administration, is that it was just change. And there is no plan. And the more we see that, and we are going to get derailed by so many things. The Prime Minister's attention is going to be on Greenland and whatever else. So where's the other plan that we're supposed to just go along with?
And talking of defence, that's another big story on the front of the Times this morning. A £28 billion black hole in the MOD, talking about cuts to the military at the same time as when Putin has just said, actually, I noticed that there were some British troops joining US forces in trying to take over a Russian-flagged vessel, an oil tanker, right, your card's marked, you know. So what is going on
we
there?
promised to spend 3% more.
Yes, indeed. So what's going on with defence, Salma?
So we've been looking at this story and various news sources all morning, and we can't work out where this £28 billion
Just explain.
Yeah, so what we've been told, again, you might say this is probably what you still can't understand, is that there was an assessment done, a whole spending review done.
Exactly.
And they were confident, you know, Starmer said it's all been costed, everything was fine. And now they've come back and said, actually, no, there is this £28 billion hole. And it seems to be tanks and jets that might have to be cut because of it.
So in 2018, there was another story where there was a £21 billion black hole because in the assessment, somebody had missed like a fleet of frigates or, you know.
Right.
And I think just for everybody's understanding, the defence spending, £28 billion is a lot of money. Defence costs a lot of money. So there could be something very small in the grand scheme of things that is overlooked or not part of the full thing.
Do we know what the full defence spending is? Does anybody quote a figure? Caroline's thinking, oh, God, don't ask me.
I know, I can't think of what it is off the top of my head.
We'll find out by the time we come back next.
Yeah, I mean, because it's hard to know whether that's half, 2% or what, isn't it?
So, look, I think what's concerning, listening to this story today, is that the government did do a review. More money was supplied for defence. Commitments have been given to increase defence spending over time, part of our NATO commitments and everything else. So where has this come from? Procurement costs for tanks, for jets, for frigates and everything else is enormous.
And energy costs have gone up for
they're billion of
everybody,
contracts
So
over time. And they've not been covered in...
£60.2 billion, helpfully, a very well-educated producer has just told me. So that's not far off. I mean, that's more than... £28 billion is a third, isn't it?
Yeah.
Over
Quite a lot
a
of
third.
that,
So it's a big gap.
So they need to be asking, you know, I mean, they will be asking, where has this come from? What is it about?
Yes.
Is it about future costs of procurement that they're committing themselves to? But the other thing about the procurement side, and also just, it's about the strategy of what you want to do with defence.
Yes.
Because we, unfortunately, under different governments, we have had, you know, kit bought, you know, substantial military kit bought, and then it's found not to do the job you needed to do, or the purpose it was originally intended for 10 years ago when it was first started, or 15 years ago, aren't the needs that we have today.
Isn't it? Because I think that the nature of what we thought was going to be our national security issues were hacking, were bringing down of internet services, which is why, you know, should China be involved in 5G, you know, Huawei, all of that issue. But now, of course, we've got boots on the ground, Russian and others, on European land, which couldn't have been predicted. And now we're back in a sort of traditional thought, well, the military clearly are thinking, hang on, we do need equipment, we need vessels, we need stuff, not just cybersecurity and clever people. And
drones.
Sat in business,
But
sat in
the question
rooms,
is
hacking.
exactly that, which is what does new warfare look like?
Absolutely.
And so, you know, you will see loads of things about new drone technologies because you don't necessarily, boots on the ground might mean things like drones in the theatre of war, not necessarily people. And so is that strategy really thinking about that? And are we going to procure for that? And taking the risk that actually we might make a mistake?
And I think this isn't just a question for Labour. The Tories also have to answer this question, because if at the same time Kemi Badenoch, as we've heard, is said, look, let's just scrap all business rates, right?
Yeah.
So if you put together council tax, which is our in our homes, our version of business rates, and business tax on the high street, it comes to about 30 billion, right? So if you're going to cancel half of that, which is business rates, and then at the same time you've got defence saying that, the Tories also have to answer, how are you going to fund all of this then? If in a few years' time there's an election and Farage has to answer these questions, right?
Of course, everybody does. But the reality is that today, the people that are making the decision on defence and the ones who are taking the choices about those Russian flagged ships, about the escalation of tension in global warfare, about what actually we need to prepare for, those decisions are being taken by Labour government. I will say this, John Healey is an excellent Defence Secretary, and you know, as a Tory, I do have a lot of faith in what he does.
Interesting.
He is getting on with the job.
Getting on with the job, says Caroline. Right, motorists have been a topic of much conversation this week, looking at the new bill for sensible reasons to try and create protection and look at the elderly and young drivers and whether they should, you know, be allowed licence, if you like, to the road in a slightly different way. This is a different version of that, not part of the bill. So speeding fines, which you may not know, because I'm sure you're perfect drivers, the government currently has a 6-month limit on legal action. So you're caught speeding on a camera, there's a whole process that has to go through before they come and say you've been caught speeding. And they're saying that that has to all take place within 6 months. Now they're saying that this could go on for a long time, almost limitless is one of the proposals. So it could mean you're caught speeding, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and actually you only get your fine and your decision on that speeding later. And of course, this is a problem because a lot of it is to do with cameras. And as we know, there's been a whole fuss, we talked about it on the show, about this particular area where the cameras were malfunctioning, particularly on smart motorways, and people were very cross because they were trying to say it wasn't me. It feels like another war on motorists to some, but has it got any kind of benefit at all?
I think it has got some benefit because, I think the idea that just the sort of time runs out at 6 months, that you're not liable for an offence that you've motor offence you committed is unfair.
I didn't know there was a limit.
I have had a speeding fine in my time. I've been driving since I was 17. Yes, I did get to 9 points once, I have to say. I've done several speed awareness courses. Am I confessing too much?
Yeah.
Maybe I probably am.
I think you are.
But it's interesting because I think for most people watching, if you get even a parking fine, you panic and you pay it immediately. You don't even. Was I there? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And it's interesting who this is targeting. This must be targeting
also
the thousands of people who push it and push it and push it.
And also people do. Some people are gaming the system.
Yes,
I'm sorry to say that, but
are.
some people are, and some people might be difficult to trace because they've moved house or whatever. There's all sorts of issues. And the other thing is also sometimes, and certainly not for you, Ranveer, but some people who are speeding, there might be other things going on there as well. They might not be insured. There might be other things happening as well.
Exactly.
And
so
these are important. So I do think
it
it's about justice and about I would ask a question about why it is taking so long, but I don't see why someone should get off because a 6 month, shutter comes down.
But that's the point. Right. So I agree. If you speeded, then it doesn't necessarily need a 6 month cut-off. But what is the process of actually bringing people to justice? And are we actually going to do this swiftly? If we're still waiting 4 or 5 years to wait for a speeding fine, then I would suggest that there's something wrong in the process of being able to put that out.
Right, and that's probably true because we know all those processes are overlaid and slowed down. Shall we talk about the story that's featured on the front page of The Sun today, but also has been a saga, a sad saga, I think, for ages, which is to do with the Beckhams and their son, Brooklyn. So it now appears that Brooklyn's actually sent a legal letter back in the summer saying, do not contact me, to the family in any way. And this was further sparked because it looks like Victoria Beckham liked a post of Brooklyn's. He was talking about some lovely chicken dish.
I just wondered whether something so
made.
Innocent as a chicken and beer recipe could cause such
a
friction.
And she just said a heart on it, and he's like, no. So it's obviously really deep-rooted, and it's sad, isn't it? We've seen it with Harry, haven't we? Prince Harry and the royal family. When things get so far, can they ever really be unpicked?
Look, everybody wants and believes in family as a really important unit. And indeed, in public policy, the family unit is actually really important in terms of securing your future and your outcomes. So there is a bit of a difference between what you do in terms of that hub and that security and the reality of the emotions and toxicity that then becomes part of families as you get older and become adults. I do think that there is a point at which certain fallouts occur and actually you can't come back from them because the hostility is such that there is no moving on from it. So I think you've got to be really careful about the way that those relationships and those interactions work.
I think when the lawyers get involved, Caroline, that becomes very, very tricky. It does say in The Sun, this is their exclusive story this morning, apparently this letter was sent some time ago, perhaps in August, but that they're saying that Brooklyn Beckham is in touch with his grandparents. And it's interesting because I think lots of people listening to this and will go, oh yeah, we've had family dysfunction, I haven't spoken to my brother for years, or I haven't spoken to, grandparents, children, whatever.
Yeah.
There is fallout is a very, very common. Shakespeare wrote about it. It's as far back as the Bible, isn't it? Right? But it's interesting. So, but the grandparent thing, I think, is a really interesting point in this. Is that he's still talking to grandparents. Clearly, he wants contact with his family.
Yes.
Blood is thicker than water.
And is there a wider thing? And I'd love to know what people at home think of this because we might talk about it later. Is there something different about the Gen Z generation that they're more likely to stand up and challenge in that way, either legally or otherwise, and go, actually, Mum and Dad, I'm not having this, and take those sort of formal steps that I don't think I would have ever done. Not that I've had need to, if my mum and dad are watching. But, you know, is there something different? Because we just seem to see it more played out in that way.
I don't know if it's more. I certainly would say that social media, I mean, obviously we're talking about a very well-known family. This plays out probably
and
across the country.
I think social media is the thing, because David
it's an
has
amplifier.
posted pictures and so on. And it's according that he feels overwhelmed by the social media tagging.
I mean, I remember, a couple of decades ago now, I think it was an American story where a child or someone, they sought to divorce from their parents, I think, at the time. I can't remember exactly all the circumstances. So I do think social media is a thing, because it's almost like we can all sort of, it's like a voyeurism. We can sort of see what's going on. Oh, Victoria's love heart this, and what's going on about that, and the next thing it's in the paper.
And of course we saw with Adam Peaty's wedding to Gordon Ramsay's daughter, there was a lot written in the days run up to that about his parents not going to the wedding, and they had used social media, I think.
I think that basically, you know, this isn't new. This happens in families. We've just come through the Christmas and New Year, and you know, when families come together, it's not always as successful. We'll have very high expectations and this sort of thing. But at the same time, I think I agree with you that sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with adults in particular, people are choosing their own life course and that's it. But actually, other family members can play a role.
Good. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
To get in touch.
Yes.
Maybe you've had similar issues in your family, and how did you come back? It would be good to talk about it. It is our lead story, and this is potential cut in business rates for pubs particularly. So in a way, it's not really a cut, it's just a less of a removal of the reduction. So 75% was given to pubs during COVID, when obviously there was a great need for them then. Potentially that's going down to 40%, and it was going to be got rid of altogether by April. And now it seems the government's doing a U-turn and will hold and not remove that lift for pubs.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very mixed about this, because on the one hand, hospitality really is struggling, and pubs in particular, not least because there are fewer people going out, there's less money to spend, and so that sector is going to be hurt very hard by these business rates. Equally, though, I think a lot of people who are criticising this, you have to consider the fact that there is going to be a black hole in the finances, and the budget that we just saw last year that, you know, taxed us a lot and essentially didn't really improve public services all that much. That calculation is based on these business rates coming in. So if you do cut the business rates, how long for? That you could do something temporary to help hospitality get back on its feet. Or, you know, if you try and scrap it all together, you still have
Kemi Badenoch has suggested.
As Kemi Badenoch, and indeed, you know, Reform's criticised it as well. What are you actually going to do to fill that black hole? So I get that hospitality is in a really difficult situation. We do need to do something. Perhaps there's a temporary holiday extension that you could add to these business rates so that it's not going to be for another 5 years. But
you know, if
do you think that might be what they do, actually, Caroline? Do you think they might be just soften it? Which, of course, then looks like they're listening to the person who shouted the loudest, and the pubs have been
I think it's a good thing that governments are listening. I mean, it's a bit of our democracy that happens. It'd be a really sad day if that wasn't the case. I think there are some aspects of this where more information has come in to indicate that actually the way they were looking at it before, it was going to be a bigger hit than they thought. Because for a lot of these pubs, their valuation since we've come out of the pandemic has gone up enormously. And therefore, we've heard horror stories around people saying it's going to be a 70% increase and all these sort of things.
I thought Rachel Reeves had courted small business, courted big business. She was the woman for the job, knew her numbers. Even George Osborne was like, she's the woman for the job. I mean, it just seems a bit ludicrous. You've had all this time in opposition to get your numbers right. It's not like they were just rushed into government.
There's certain numbers, Ranveer, that you would have had, but some of these evaluations of these hospitality sectors has only happened post-pandemic.
Although,
but isn't it good that they're saying we're going to rethink the transition and we're going to do something about it? That's a good thing.
It's interesting on the pubs thing, because whilst you might think that there's just uniform support for them, actually some people are emailing in saying, like, Stuart, stuff the pubs, make them fall in line with other businesses on the high street, and if they can't make a profit, then close. Ian says on WhatsApp, society's changing. We need fewer pubs. If a business can't meet its costs, it shouldn't be a business.
And John says Starmer and Reeves need to grow a backbone and stop the U-turn. What's the point in making policies if you're not going to see them through? Pubs and farmers should pay their taxes like everyone else.
I think there's Definitely, I think there is a good argument to say if you're not going to survive as a business, it's a very Tory argument, if you're not going to survive as a business, then you need to reconsider what you're going to do as a business. However, there is something that is very special and unique that's added both by farmers and the family farm, because that is about food security and supply. So this is not just somebody trying to make some money. This is very critical to our system. And also with pubs, not all pubs, but with a majority of pubs, perhaps the ones that I go to, which are about independent ownership, which are about community, and bring those things together. Now, if you can separate out the purpose and what it does beyond its business means, then I think that's a better way of thinking about it.
In this situation, it seems that they can't win, Labour can't win. Listening seems to now be perceived as a weakness and as a lack of preparedness.
Listen, no, sorry, Caroline, you can. Just on what you said before, it's good for governments to listen. Yeah, but they can do the listening before they go through this process.
But the process is that you do listen before, but also before you actually activate something, you listen again. What I would say is, the hospitality sector is really diverse.
Yeah.
And maybe just having one sort of policy that suits everyone is not the way forward.
Caroline,
but the other thing
the
is...
producers accusing me of not listening to them. So I'm going to have to... Can you make amends? How do we get families back together? Former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah thinks it's OK to cut off family when necessary. Wonder if her family's watching. But former Labour Minister Caroline Flint says there should always be a way back. Why would you consider cutting off family? Not necessarily yourself, but when's the moment when it's right to do so?
I think there has to be, real relationship breakdown in order for that to happen. And, most people aren't going to go through a long process of mediation with members of their family. I think this is about adults making that choice. I don't think this is necessarily about children making that choice, because the family is a very important unit when it comes to growth, abilities and opportunities. And in public policy, we support family. But I think this is a different dynamic about when you become an adult, when you maybe, in the case of Brooklyn Beckham, get married, want to make your own choices. I think for him, particularly with super famous parents who've been incredibly successful, that dynamic must play into it at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about marriage. Michelle on WhatsApp says, and there's lots of you responding this morning, my darling son has abandoned me since he got engaged. I've been cut off from my 3-year-old granddaughter, and not one word of why.
Which
Kevin,
is not dissimilar to some of the reports about the Beckhams, is
Yeah.
it? That it's the new wife and girlfriend that's
And
caused the
Caroline,
problem.
Kevin on WhatsApp says, I've not seen or spoken to my siblings for 25 years. Sometimes it's better to cut your losses and get on your life without drama-free life. There is something in that, but you disagree.
I agree. I agree. There is something in that. And when I'm saying there should be a way back, I'm not saying that you therefore you can constantly every day try to regain that relationship. Actually, a distance apart, things change in people's lives is helpful sometimes in these things. But at the end of the day, there's always possibly, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, potentially the door open.
You look at Harry and the King, there is quiet rumblings that they may soon be.
But how do you respect each other's boundaries? I think that's the thing. And I think quite often what happens is when the birds fly the nest, in some cases, parents can't let go of that control. So it's very easy to blame whoever's sort of married in and changed the dynamic. Maybe there are issues there, but there's a toxicity. And I think once you're a grown-up, that dynamic between parents and children doesn't always change.
We saw that with Adam Peaty in his wedding to Gordon Ramsay's daughter.
And, and sometimes, things do happen and there's breakdown. And you're not going to solve that with some mediation. So some time apart is helpful.
Or a lawyer's letter.
Or definitely
a lawyer's
not.
letter.
And the other thing around social media, I think, younger people today, are very much more likely to be on social media, sharing a lot of things. And once that's out there, how do you take that back? Even if 5 years down the road, you think, what I said 5 years ago, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
That's the problem, isn't it? And I think we all feel it, because you say people in families know the dynamic is difficult. We're a happy family, and you've been delightful this morning, both of you. Thank you very much for being on the show.